Welcome back to Gators Game Day. Seth Varnadore, joined by Bud Davis. We're back for the first off-season show here. We're going to talk a little bit about the spring game. We like to go back, check out the film, look at the stats of each game. The spring game is no exception, but this time we can talk about some other off-season stuff, spring practice, a lot of good stuff. Bud, how was your off-season so far?
I mean, it's always great when you win a national championship. So we've got that going for us. That was awesome. I hope everybody enjoyed it. You only get to see so many in your life. And that Gator team was really cool. You don't see many built like it. You especially don't see many built like that win championships. So, yeah, I mean, that was good. And it's fun to have a little bit of football to talk about. We got the spring game to talk about, spring portal period. We've kind of wrapped up the recruiting class. The roster seems pretty well solidified. We're going to have the draft. We got lots of good stuff.
Napier said they had agreements with 98% of the roster. So I thought that was interesting language. That kind of raised some eyebrows, that language. But I think you have to be glad to hear your coach talking like that because we're there, right? Like there's no illusions that this is not. Nico. Yeah, there was none of that, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, just come out and say it. We've got agreements with all these guys. This is a negotiation a lot of times, so you'd rather be there than denying it, I guess, right? So, all right, let's get into. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think this has been like the best offseason Napier's had from not just high school recruiting, but portal management, the guys we've seen let go, it's not kind of the same level, I think, as the guys in the past. It seems like we've been a little bit smarter at the roster construction side. Oh, we hired a GM too. Finally did it.
Yeah.
We did the damn thing and got a really good one. I'm happy about that. So
yeah, I think there was some consternation about it, and we talked about it. The most important thing, right, and we'll probably go more into detail on like off-season hires and things like that at a later date. But the most important thing was get a guy that's dealt with contracts before, because some of the other names are being thrown around were guys that had been scout, like Jim Nagy, who's at Oklahoma now, was super popular, but he's never negotiated a contract ever. He's a scout, which that's helpful, but I think they do a pretty good job identifying the players. It's more about getting guys signed and having relationships with agents. So I think the guy they hired should be pretty good.
Yeah. I'm excited. I feel like there's definitely things to be positive about with where the program is trending.
And it certainly seems like if they're able to, which they haven't been able to do a ton in this tenure so far, but they've got momentum. If they're able to kind of capitalize on it, you kind of feel like you're moving in the right direction. You're good to go. Like this could be a year if you are able to capitalize on the momentum, make the playoff. Well, now you should be set. It's somewhat self-sustaining at that point. It's hard to get to that point, but they seem like they're close. So we'll see if they can do it. Now the spring game, not always the orange and blue game, not always the biggest indicator of who's going to be awesome and who's not. But it is fun to go back and look at. I've got some video we can watch for a couple plays of just kind of some of the big runs because Jacoby Jackson obviously had a humongous game. And then you got some stats that kind of stuck out to you. So just before we watch the film, what was really kind of going back and looking through the numbers after the game? What really kind of stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned it. I mean, number one that jumps out to me is like the rushing numbers for the blue team. So what was going on there? Jackson and Ball, obviously, like that's a great combo. But what did the blue O line look like that was able to really apparently push around this orange D line, who were on those different units trying to feel some of that out. So Barber and Slaughter on the blue, and those are guys that are guaranteed starters. Lovett, Kearney, Waits also on the blue. But then they went up against, McCray, Robinson, Sapp, Boyro. Like it was kind of on paper, it looked like a pretty even matchup, but apparently Blue was able to kind of push them around there. Maybe I think you'll bring it up in the film, but maybe some bad run fits. That jumped out.
Yeah, and I think Robinson kind of tweaked something early and got pulled. So it wasn't exactly, now it wasn't totally the starting offensive line, but they weren't really going up against the starting defensive line either. So it seems like I think that the Blue may have had the kind of talent advantage in that game. They were able to push them around a little bit.
Yeah, I think on the another stat that kind of jumped out, number of pass attempts for the Orange side, they were throwing the ball like crazy with Harrison Bailey, but he took 5 sacks. That's a lot of sacks on 40-something pass attempts.
Yeah.
And, I think, the transfer from UMass, Sorry, he had 2 sacks, which got to feel good about that. And then Ty Jackson, the freshman linebacker, he had a sack, and he led the Orange team in tackles. He had 11 tackles. So anytime a true freshman's putting up numbers like that in a spring game, I think that's kind of a guy that now I'm going to start looking for his name, Ty Jackson.
Good, good Ty Jackson story. So I went to the coaches clinic this year for Napier's been doing it every year. He's been up there. Cool part is it's a Thursday, Friday thing. Thursday, and it's usually before one of the scrimmages. So Thursday you get to watch practice, full access, not just the media window. You get full access to practice, and then Friday they have clinic time and things like that when the guys aren't practicing, because it's usually a day on, a day off in the spring, right? So I got to watch practice on Thursday. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about I think during the winter portal period, we talked about the J. Michael Sturdivant get at receiver. And we'll talk about him again here in a little bit. But, one of the big things with him is he's like he runs 100 meters in the 10 second range, 10-4, 10-3, something like that. So obviously that speed is one of his calling cards. So I'm watching 7-on-7, and somehow Jackson gets matched up on Sturdivant. And it's a go route, and he just runs in his hip pocket. It wasn't the full field; it was like 25, but still, it's like he was in his hip pocket and forced incompletion, I think. So I was like, "Who is that? Who's this defensive back?" And so I checked the roster. I'm like, "Oh, it's that freshman linebacker that Napier said has the greatest high school film he's ever seen." So that plus 11 tackles in the spring game might be one to watch there.
Yeah, definitely going to be on our radar now. I mean,
yeah, it was freaky. There was a couple freshmen in practice that kind of flashed, and then I'll have some more later on actual stuff from the clinic, because there was some pretty good info in there. Listen to Callaway and O'Hara talk, so we'll have some stuff on that later. But what else kind of stuck out to you looking at the numbers in the spring game? At practice, the receiving group kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah. So on the receiver side, I mean, there's 2 stats that caught my eye as we're kind of thinking about, and it's an area that I am concerned about. Florida's returning production at receiver is very low. We've got DJ Lagway. Are we potentially missing a window by not having a good wide receiver core? This is something I've been thinking about, trying to talk through, bring data to, and there's a number that makes me feel very good and warm and fuzzy, and that's Dallas Wilson on 13 targets going 195 yards. That is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And on 10 receptions, so 10 of 13, 195 yards. That is exactly what you want for one of these highly rated freshman receivers. That's awesome. I think I had him projected at like 45 routes, maybe 200 or maybe 100 yards or something like that. That's going to get bumped up. If he's seeming like a guy that can get 100, 150, 200 routes in a season, he's going to have pretty high production. And I think that offense needs this. So that's making me feel warm and fuzzy. I feel really good about that. The J. Michael Sturdivant, he's a guy who a lot of people are excited for the speed numbers, but the production just really isn't there, especially his rate production. And I think we kind of saw that potentially again in the orange and blue game. He only had 1 reception on 7 targets. So he got 7 targets, but really only 1 reception for 29 yards. Now, we saw DK have really low numbers in the spring game last year. So you don't want to overreact to this, but like this is a guy that was already kind of a red flag for me. This is another data point where it's like, is this guy, gonna put up 300 yards on 200 routes, which would be bad? Or is he going to be able to push for 500 yards, which I kind of think is around his ceiling? So those are two that jumped out to me on the receiving side.
So watching practice, he had a couple big catches in practice, but it was similar to the one he had in the Orange and Blue game. So he kind of caught a go route in kind of a 50-50 ball almost. The one in the Orange and Blue game probably should have been intercepted, but he was able to come back and make the catch. But it was a similar kind of down the field, back shoulder thing, made a nice catch. So I think his role, and then he had another catch where he ran kind of a post or like a deeper slant down in the red zone. They were kind of working more red zone stuff, and he did a great job shielding the defensive back with his body. So I think he's a big body guy that knows how to use his body well, but he doesn't have a ton of wiggle. So I don't, that's what I'm, in the SEC, a lot of dudes are fast. So can he separate? Now, he didn't create a ton of separation on the two catches he had. So maybe if you're a really good contested catch guy, then you'll be fine. But I think he's just going to be Justin Shorter again. And if he can be as productive as Justin Shorter was, I think he'd be probably pretty happy.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I think the good part of it is, Dallas Wilson is playing the same position as Sturdivant. So you may get more production there at X just because Wilson's a lot better than you think or than initially thought or initially is more of a function of how often do freshman receivers see the field, which interesting from practice. So I thought in the day I saw, so I only saw one day, I didn't see a lot, but I thought Dallas Wilson was the third best one that day out of the three freshman receivers. He got open, but he wasn't able, like the throws he had one drop that was kind of a bad drop. But then he almost made a diving catch, but wasn't able to finish it on a bad throw. But like Vernell Brown was breaking people off in the red zone. Nation Montgomery was breaking people off. So I think that, and then like a guy like Tank Hawkins is exceptionally fast and was kind of, if he can kind of consistently catch the ball, I think he could be useful. So I think they've got some guys that can play at receiver. So that was encouraging to see.
Yeah. It's really, prove it, for a lot of these guys and who's going to step up into that role. So it's good to have the talent that they brought in.
And Vernell, VB3 was running with the ones. Like he was working with that first group. And you saw that in the spring game as well. He was working with more of the first group. Dallas Wilson worked with the second group. I don't know if that's just so, hey, get him all the reps there at X. But I think you could see multiple of those guys be helpful and contribute early, which will be nice. Which I think if two of those guys pop with Mizell seems like he might be primed to kind of take that next step. And then if you get Wilson just healthy, Eugene Wilson, I think all of a sudden you feel a lot better about that position. Because one thing for sure about all these dudes is they can all roll. Like this is a fast group.
It's so funny. There was a while there where, Billy Gonzalez was like, he was going after the big 6'3", receivers that
I have a theory.
weren't that shifty. And like, we didn't get a ton of production from them. And then,
I have a theory on that.
Oh, let's hear it.
Okay. So my theory is that all started at Mississippi State with Dan Mullen, which they could not get the explosive guys. So they shifted to let's get the big body guys that can run block and that can catch contested catches, and we'll scheme them open. We don't need them to kind of get themselves open. We'll scheme them open. And I felt like they carried that over to Florida. It's like, you're at Florida. You can recruit explosive dudes now. You don't have to recruit big stiffs.
And now look where we are.
Yeah, not really any many big stiffs.
Yeah, maybe JMS. He's on my
maybe Sturdivant. We'll see. Hopefully not. Yeah. But he can. At least he's explosive. Like he's a shorter type. I think where he's a little stiff, but he can run really fast in a straight line. So I'm excited to see. Hopefully we're wrong on him, but
previous
data doesn't really say
No, it doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy.
All right, so let's look at some. I picked a couple plays. These are ripped off of Twitter, so thank you to the people I got them from. But we'll watch a few of these. So here's one of the first touchdown runs. It looks like just kind of a normal zone play. And then just a good run and kind of cutting it back against the grain. You kind of get a fit up here, and he kind of tracks back inside, and the back makes a good. I think some of these were just like good runs, but some of them was guys aren't quite fitting real well, and you make them pay.
It looked like there were 5 rushers there, and the left tackle is just cleaning house.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. They blocked pretty well up front on a lot of these. The next one was blocked up like really well. You'll see Slaughter on this next run like blast a guy, and then he's able to get up to the second level and really clean it up. But nothing crazy on these. I think the only thing to watch for is they had this attached, and this is what. So there's an RPO here, and there's also one down here. So the touchdown to Mizell, which I meant to grab, I don't think I did. We'll see. But it was basically this. It was a run play call, and he threw the speed out. Mizell caught it and got up the sideline. But here's a pretty good individual play from the running back, but not bad up front either. This next one, you can see this gets caught a little late, but you'll watch here. This is a double, but Slaughter does a good job of kind of putting this guy back on the guard so the guard can take it by himself. And you'll see Slaughter kind of climb to the second level. You go split zone here, and that gets this backer to kind of drift this way, and you're able to get up to the second level, and then the safety doesn't fit right. I'm not sure what he's doing here. He kind of turns and opens almost like they're bracketing this guy, but it's kind of at this like
they're kind of at a shot part of the field.
Yeah, so I don't know if he thinks this is going to be play action, so he just turns to bracket, but I would think he could see the handoff here, but you see there, like this gets him. So the split action gets this backer out, and they're able to double and climb and kind of form a wall here. And you could see Slaughter was able to kind of bang this dude back on the guard and climb. And so really, once he comes to fit out here and he turns, the other safety turns to go, it's over at that point, right? It's just so I don't know if that was like you said, maybe shot. He's thinking shot here, but I would think he could see the handoff, but I don't know. But so good. That was really well blocked up front. Then the long one, this one's, I say, more just lucky than anything. Because right here, the play's pretty much dead. I think some guys probably stop their feet. Guys kind of slow down, and then he breaks it out. I did like seeing this. I think this is this is I believe that's the Woods, the freshman kid, right? I believe he's wearing 15. He chased him all the way, even though he probably wasn't going to catch him. He chased him all the way to the goal line. So that's always good to see, that kind of hustle. But this one was more struck me more as a function of luck and kind of sticking to
probably waiting for the ref to blow the whistle.
Yeah. So here's a couple passing game things I saw. So they were getting bunch on, I think he's bubbling. He's running a snag route, and it looks like he's running more of the out or corner. But if you start it from where the bunch is, right, it's the guy at the top is probably the tight end. He's probably running a corner. This is just Y corner from a bunch, which is an air raid staple, which they've been running. And the one thing I'm not sure on is that he's a little flat, so I don't know if he's reading this. And then also the next time they run what I think is an option, he breaks in. So the next time we see it, we're going to see this guy break in. So I don't know if that's just two different plays or if he has the option to do that. But for this play, it's just your standard Y corner, which you see all over the place. And then on the backside, I think he's got an option route. So he can break out, and you see the middle linebackers vacated because of the bunch. They're probably playing, I'm assuming they're playing box or some type of kind of box to the bunch, which is give me a guy short, an outside, a guy long and outside, a guy short and inside, a guy long and inside. So you play 4 over 3. So if you're reading this out, you can kind of look here. As soon as this guy turns and runs there, I know if it is an option, I'm probably going to get that guy coming back across face here to the vacated area, which is what happens. And so that's Nation Montgomery. But I think it was just an option route. So using this, and for the quarterback, it's kind of an easy read. I'm assuming they're probably saying, hey, just watch this backer.
Mm-hmm.
If he opens this way, you're just working the option route. And so once he breaks inside, give it to him.
Those 2 high safeties were getting deep, man.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Is some of these, it's like it's pretty vanilla. Like it's not the most complex looks here. I put this one on here because this is an old faithful. You got the slant here. You got a tight bunch, and then the back outside, which is interesting. So you're going to get your back matched up on a linebacker, and you got the go route. So
do that a ton.
Last year I heard Napier talk. So this is just our good friend spacing. This is 4-man spacing with a slant backside, our good friend. And we'll talk a little bit about why we think they run that so often. I think we've got a nice working theory on that now. But there, and then outside you got the go. Then here I think you got the slant, right? So how Florida likes to do it is they'll put something you like against 2 high to one side, something you like against 1 high to the other. The quarterback can kind of look at this free safety, and they teach it in a cool way. I'll talk about that later, kind of how they teach it. But here you get your running back matched up on a linebacker. Take a shot, but, Miles Graham is right in his hip pocket and is able to run with it. Makes a good play on it. So that's good to see from a defensive perspective, I suppose. So Dallas Wilson had a few catches on this concept here. And this was they're basically running smash and Y cross. So a lot of times when you're on Y cross, typical Y cross is a go route. So you're getting somebody in this deep third, a flat route. You're getting somebody in this flat. Then you got the crossing route coming here. So just like the normal, if it was all from the same side, you'd call it flood, but it's the same idea, right? You kind of got 3 levels going here. Florida's going to do the same exact thing. They're just going to change it up because some teams will go smash with this, but instead of running a go route, he's going to run an inside stem corner route, and he's got the flat route. So this, if depending on the coverage, if you're getting like 2 read or palms at the corner, as soon as he sees one to the flat, he's going to take it. So now you've got kind of a one-on-one on the corner out here. You still got the crosser, and you still got the dig.
Yeah, it's the same vertical stretch, but a different route.
Yeah, just the same. Basically, we're still getting one to the flat, one to the middle, one to the deep third, but it's just we're going to inside in the corner. But it's good against this palms look or this 2 read look because as soon as he sees him go flat and he's inside, he's going to leave him. And now you've got all this room to work outside on the safety, right? So that's kind of what happens here. He goes inside. You see he takes the flat, and now he's able to run into this vacated space. Instead of where it would be the same if he had the go route, but now the hole's a little bit tighter. The safety can kind of fly over the top. Now he's got to stay on the hash because you could run a post, So you give him a 2-way go. He finds the space. Do the same thing here for the touchdown. They just motion to it. But they kind of know they're getting that look. Inside stems, gets vertical. Good ball there. Yeah, so good ball. So Bailey, he takes sacks. I think that's something you put in kind of the notes for the show. It's kind of he took a lot of sacks at other places too. So that's not just the orange and blue game phenomenon. But you can see here it's the same thing. It's smash, like inverted smash with the cross backside. And then here I think was just another option. So this is one they threw to Duke Clark. But I think it's the same idea basically where we're gonna release him vertical. And now I don't know if he's got a true option here where he's outside leverage on breaking it in, but they're a little bit different at the top this time. So he's still there. He's bubbling out. Instead of this guy running a corner, he's actually going to run a dig, which you're seeing a ton of people run is like the variation. But I'm assuming it's kind of the same idea. If the backer opens or gets a ton of depth, I can just drop it to the back on the option route. If it is an option route, it could just be called, but I think the way it looks, it could be the option route. And he's able to pick up a nice gain on 3rd and 3. So that's kind of the selection of plays I had because Some of them were, same stuff we've seen before, but that one I thought was a pretty good selection there. So
Yeah, that was great.
yeah, some a little bit different wrinkles, but nothing crazy.
Well, let's kind of, you kind of talked a little bit about like, why we think we're seeing so much spacing on third down and like how they teach that. Do you want to talk like about the clinic?
Yeah, I can go there. We can go there. Do you want to go there before? Do you want to talk kind of about the general? I've got the run game stuff here. Do you want to talk
Yeah,
through that first?
Yeah, we can talk about some general scheme stuff. Maybe that'll set it up. But
all right, so I've got some of your. Which one do you want me to put up? You want me to put up the?
I'll start with the passing. So this is a chart. I started putting these out in the off season. You hear a lot of narratives about Florida's passing game looks like this. Florida's passing game looks like that. Seth and I try and break it down as much as I can. But I actually wanted to see like, how does Florida's passing game compare to what all the other teams in college football are doing? So this chart shows that. On the bottom is the percentage of our routes. So, you can have multiple routes called on the same play, but, these routes do tell you a lot about the types of plays you're running. And then the routes themselves are over there on the y-axis, and they're ordered by how common they are across FBS. So curls, most common route in college football. So if somebody says Florida runs a lot of curls, everybody runs a lot of curls. Florida runs slightly above average in curls, but really they're right within the normal range. I think where you start to see Florida stand out is with this group that I call crossers and corners. You see Florida really hammer the deep cross. So that's kind of on the middle of the y-axis. Florida's running at, roughly twice the rate of everybody else. We're an extreme outlier there. And, if you watch football, if you watch this podcast, if you watch Gator football, you've seen a lot of these deep crosses. These are these Y crosses. A lot of times come from slot receivers, tight ends on the other side of a formation. We see a lot of those, and Florida gets a ton of their explosives from those deep crossers.
And what's interesting about this is we're going to talk to, at the end of the show here, we're talking to Matt Edwards, who works with StatBomb in the HUDL. And he talked about kind of that intermediate middle of the field area being one of the most kind of efficient ways to get explosives. And so the deep cross and the digs kind of attack that area. And you see Florida uses both those quite a bit.
Yeah, and a couple other things jump out. I mean, you see the flat, which is, a lot of times paired with this deep cross to give you some of that vertical stretch that, we just saw in the highlight with that flood concept. And then, you see a lot of the corners. So corner, it's, a little further down, but this is really one of the more explosive. And we also pair it sometimes with this deep cross to get that vertical stretch to the outside. I think what jumps out that you don't see for Florida is, the go routes. You don't see pure fades. You don't see pure outs. So the way that we target the boundary is really with these corner routes and then the crossers coming across from the other side. But we're not throwing goes. So this is kind of where, when you're thinking about like, how do guys like Sturdivant fit in? This is where it's like, yeah, he can run fast in a straight line. Like, we don't do that a ton. Goes and seams, fades, we're well below average on all of those guys. So
he's going to be, I think, your big post shot guy. He's going to be your big deep shot guy. So maybe those corners, maybe those posts where it's not like, it is kind of one cut and go. There's not quite as much stop start in it. You can roll into them a little bit sometimes. So
yeah.
And then I think the other thing that's kind of interesting to see is that they did pair in the spring game, they paired the speed out with some of their run game stuff. And that's what Mizell caught for a touchdown. So maybe they're adding a little bit more of that to some of the RPO stuff. And I think if with Lagway playing, they'll be more willing to kind of throw those. So it may change a little bit, but I think the kind of core of the offense probably remains the same.
Yeah. And so I also looked at, Florida has this offensive profile with route usage. How does that compare to, everybody else in FBS, and what are the most similar teams? And I thought this was really interesting because this really gets like at if it's scheme coaching or play callers, because one of the things you see is like the teams that were most similar to have good offenses, like Miami, Oregon, Georgia, Texas. Like these aren't scrubs. Like these are good teams and had effective offenses last year. Notre Dame's on here. This is what a lot of teams have similar profiles in their route usage and play calling, offensive passing scheme play calling looks like. So I thought this was pretty interesting, and we're going to dive into it, and I'm going to hopefully improve it a little bit as the season goes on. So it's not just routes. It'll look at personnel. It'll look at maybe the run game. You want to throw the run game up?
Yeah, let's do that. Let me get that up here.
But look at, kind of what the full profile is. Like what's your most similar passing team? What's your most similar rushing team? What's your most similar overall team? So that you can kind of have an idea how much of this is scheme versus personnel and play calling. So this is one that shouldn't surprise most of you, but Florida is a heavy outside zone team. You can see we're well above the average in that. A little bit below on inside zone, which I thought was interesting, especially considering we had an All-American there, right at center. So obviously you can rely on your center to help out in a lot of different ways. But really, you see that outside zone and stretch. Florida is really a team that likes to take its run game to the perimeter, pitch too, get outside and stress teams that way when we run the ball.
Yeah, and I think the jet sweep usage here will shock people. That would if you kind of ask people what is Florida doing, it's just jet sweeps and check downs. Well, they're not. They're kind of barely. Was that like barely above average in jet sweep, or kind of in the?
Yeah, and some of this is Florida's just smart with a lot of things aren't actually jet sweeps that get called jet sweeps. They're actually those little pop passes, so they're not getting classified as a rush.
That's true.
Which is probably smart. I think in the passing game, I think they show up as. Oh man, I forget how those get tagged, but yeah. So, outside zone team, Florida's run game profile is we really like to attack the boundaries. This profile is similar to most of FBS. Again, like looking
I'll try to throw that one up. It's somewhat tough to see, but we'll see if we can kind of point out where Florida is.
Florida's right next to Colorado and Minnesota. So, yeah, we're right in the middle. So if you go to the bottom of where it says outside zone and then go over, we're right in the middle of the outside zone area. Yeah, there we are. So we've got Florida and then Minnesota, Colorado. Virginia's right there. Texas, Georgia, not too far away. But there's a ton of these teams that live in this outside zone world. I don't know. Anything jump out to you, Seth?
No, I thought it was interesting. I think Florida was close to Georgia in both, weren't they?
Yeah.
Which was interesting. But this isn't too. I think if you would have asked me, hey, well, how would you classify Florida's run game? I would say it's kind of that Shanahan, McVay stretch zone run game would be kind of the basis of it. Now, they'll tell you they got like 18 ways to run inside zone. It's really they got 5 ways to run zone, and some of them are tighter, but the way they can all hit wide, they can all bounce. I don't know if everyone can bounce, but quite a few of them can bounce. It all looks pretty similar. They're definitely a zone-based run team. So then they'll mix in a little bit of gap, but not that much. So you see some of these teams like really major in gap schemes, which is interesting.
Yeah, and that's not us, but now we've got kind of a nice way to quantify that. And then last one, you want to roll through the pass defense and then talk about your clinic?
Yeah. I don't know if I have that one up here.
Pass defense. I'll tell you the too long didn't read. Florida was in a lot of too high last year.
Which
Florida played a lot of cover 2 and a lot of man cover 2.
Yeah, which sounds like Ron Roberts.
Yeah.
Ew, which I don't know if you're aware, but he's the guy that was calling plays all last year.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's Florida, Baylor, and again, Georgia, like all right on top of each other. So
it is interesting being so close to Georgia schematically, just in these kind of tiers. Is that a mistake, you think, to be – because it's kind of like, all right, well, if you're running the same kind of stuff, you got to out-recruit them, which is really difficult, right?
Or you got to outplay call them.
Yep.
And, yeah, I don't know. It's tough, but it's not like – I don't think there is a meta in college football right now that gets you a huge advantage to win a national title doing, one particular offense or one particular style of defense. And I do think Florida's meta, like what we're trying to do with our offensive passing scheme and run game scheme, it makes sense. Like they're complementary, they're sound. You're seeing teams have success with similar schemes at this level and the NFL. Like it can be done. We know this. So there's nothing that makes me think like, oh, well, we have to change this. But then to your point, we have to recruit better. But we already knew we had to recruit better.
Yeah. So. And it seems like I think they are picking it up in the right spots, which is helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went to the clinic, got to hear Russ Callaway and Ryan O'Hara talk. I throw up there. We'll probably share more from the clinic as the offseason goes on, but I did want to share a couple things that I thought were interesting in terms, since we're talking some of the offensive stuff today. So number one, so Callaway came up and spoke, and the slides I'm going to show are from his kind of presentation to coaches. But after he got done, O'Hara came up and spoke about how good of a job Callaway was doing. First of all, these guys are locked in with Napier. Like that was kind of the first thing everybody was talking about, how good of a leader is, how much they love him, how much they follow him, how much they respect him. They talked about when it got tough last year. It was just like, hey, man, we're going through it, just figure it out kind of thing. And they just figured it out. They didn't whine. They just kind of worked through it. So these guys have a ton of respect for Napier. It's kind of the first thing that jumps out. But O'Hara said about Callaway that he basically, since he got the kind of title, he organizes the offensive staff. So he sends out itineraries to the staff about what they need to be doing, and that he also scripts practice, which I thought was interesting. So Napier's seemingly still the play caller, but Callaway is trusted to script what they are running in practice. So I thought that was interesting, to not be the guy scripting practice, but calling plays in the game. So Callaway's got it seems like he's got a lot of say over what happens, right? If he's the one scripting practice, I'm assuming they're on the same page. But I thought that was an interesting tidbit that I hadn't really heard anywhere else. So Callaway scripts the practices.
And then what's interesting is, we've talked about this before from other clinics, is we know what they do in practice. They then meet with the QBs and say, what do you like?
Yeah.
And then that is part of the call sheet building process.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I'll show some of his slides, and then we'll end with kind of a discussion on one problem or not a problem, but something that's kind of popped up a few times in the past, and why we think we have a pretty good working theory on that. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but this is offensive philosophy. So this starts with the vision from the head coach and how he wants the team to look. These are things that have to show up. The most physical team on the field. This is number one. Run to win, perimeter blocking, and pass protection. Number two, the best players were utilized. So feed the studs, and then have design to get it to play. So if I want to make sure that Trey Wilson gets his touches, I got to have plays designed to get him touches. Those might be screens, they might be gadget plays, whatever. Down the field shots, throw to score. So this is something we saw a lot in Anthony Richardson's year. This is something you see a lot when Florida gets a lot of man coverage, right? We talked about that against like Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of deep shots. Well, they want to throw to score, explosive plays in the passing game. Mix of formations, shifts, motions, and tempos. and then situation expert, so awareness and execution, blah blah blah. All that. But I thought the other parts were interesting. Kind of, it starts with physicality.
Yeah.
This one was interesting. Offensive goals by the numbers. They did a 10-year study of SEC game data, and if you achieve a single one of these goals, you win 85% of the time. You achieved one of these goals. So they're like, if you can achieve multiple, obviously your chance of winning goes up. So score 30 points, average 5.5 yards per rush, 55% on conversion downs, so 30 and fourth downs. No turnovers, win the turnover margin. 15 explosive plays, and that's 12-yard rushes, 15-yard passes. 6 big plays, which are 20-plus yards plays. 9 yards per pass attempt, 100% touchdowns in the red zone. Penalties 1 per every 30 play. And then 83 plus QBR, and so that QBR's got kind of everything built into it. And then the 12% rule, which is you can't have less than 12% of your snaps to be penalties, turnovers, drops, negatives. So any one of those, if you achieve any one of those, you win 85% of the time on average. So those are kind of how they set their goals. Like, if we can achieve one of these, we have a good chance to win. Multiple, we have a really good chance to win.
Yeah. I think you could, talk about like, oh, are those the perfect goals set? I just love to see that we set quantified, clear goals, and those were pretty reasonable ones to think about.
I'll throw this one up. This is not super what we're talking about, but I thought it was interesting. They're recruiting position profiles, what they're looking for in each position. So receiver, the 3 big things they're looking for: contested catch, hands through contact, ability to separate, and ability to run after the catch, make plays after the catch. Tight end, contested catch as well. Then toughness and effectiveness at point of attack. So they want guys that can make those tough contested catches, but also be good as a blocker. Offensive line likes contact, shows finish. So that kind of nastiness where like you're burying guys at the end there. Length, strength, and power. So obviously physical, and then flexibility to be able to recover and anchor. So that's probably like hip flexibility, ankle flexibility, that kind of stuff. Running back, mental capacity, decision-making, vision, and hands, because they do like to throw the ball to those guys. Yeah. And then quarterback, mental capacity, decision-making, accuracy, like natural accuracy, and then intense competitor is kind of their other benchmark for quarterback.
These are funny. They're a little bit different than like I would have thought. I would have thought like, QB explosive. Like that's like one thing I thought this system would like really prioritize, like big arm for a QB, running back.
I think that's
like to get outside like speed, but like having hands above speed over running back is really interesting. And not that I think that they're ever like, well, his hands are better than his speed. So like, I don't think they ever actually do that. I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, I think like arm strength is probably, and speed at running back are probably pluses, but I think it's more of a differentiator between guys that already have those other things.
Yeah, I think that was exactly it. It's like they already the first filter is speed, and then the next one is
you can't be too slow.
Did you take these photos?
I did on my phone.
You were sitting so close. You were front row, man.
I was second row. I don't want to look. I don't want to look too needy, but I was close. Call sheet numbers. So this is where we start talking, and this is something that's not new. They've talked about it in clinics in the past, but your call sheet should reflect the amount of times each situation happens in the game. So you find the low, the average, and the high for each section from the past season. Base the amount of plays you carries off of this and practice them accordingly. So they show you kind of how they allocate their practice time. They do it based on the study of the previous year. Like, okay, we're on, and I'll throw it up. It's really hard to see, but I'll throw it up and kind of read through it. But this led us to kind of I think a discovery. So for the goal line, for instance, you're on the goal.
Hold on. You can't see this that well, but just this is the practice sheet, and on it there are numbers that are the number of times they practice this situation.
And this is for the entirety of spring. So so they have it based on percentage of and you can't see it, and I can't zoom in much better, so I'll just have to kind of explain it. The first column here is the situation. The second column is the percentage of plays from the previous year that were those plays. So goal line, which you'll have some teams like, all right, it's goal line situation day. We're practicing, 2 periods, 5 plays apiece, 10 plays on goal line or something. So they go through and they look and they say, okay, goal line was 1.53% of our plays last year qualified as goal line plays. So we're only going to allocate 4 plays on our call sheet to true goal line plays. Okay. And then obviously normal downs and would be the number one. That's 27.7% of your plays are normal downs. So first and second down, not second and long. So kind of first down and then second down and, not long, not 10 plus. And then possession and 10. So the first play of a drive are your other ones. So we're looking down and we talked a lot last year about, man, it seems like they're running a lot of the same stuff on third down throughout the year. There's a lot of spacing with a slant on the backside. You see that a lot on third down. So you go through and look, all right, so third down's in yellow here. 3rd and 4 to 6 is like, you add 3rd and 4 to 6 and 3rd to 7 and 10. So 3rd and 4 to 10 is about 7% of your plays, or maybe a little bit more. So you're not dedicating a ton of things on your call sheet to that situation.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting way to practice because it maximizes kind of, all right, we're practicing and working on things that we're going to see the most. But that's one thing you've looked at is the early down offense is quite good.
Yeah.
The third down offense has not been quite as good.
Yeah, and this is frustrating. I get why you might organize a practice like this, but let's say, so let's the two numbers are last year on early down, Florida was 75th percentile on early downs. That's very good. Like Florida was not just above average, but like well above average, like on offense on early downs last year. On late downs, we were 16th percentile. That's really, really bad. That's like bottom of the barrel. And we saw a lot of predictability. And now it's like, okay, so why do we see this? And, why did it seem like Florida was running the same things over and over? Maybe we just didn't have that many practice reps on third down and say, oh, okay, well, you shouldn't do that many practice reps because you don't get in those situations that much. The problem is that if you ever look at EPA per play curves, so expected point curve, all of the leverage on these is in third downs.
So that's should they be adjusting this for the leverage of the situation and because they break it down so situationally that and they do put a big emphasis on what they call like the 4-point plays, which are the plays that either extend the drive from having to settle for a field goal to being able to go for a touchdown. But should they extend that kind of emphasis on, okay, what's the leverage? The leverage of every third down is higher, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is just like opening our eyes kind of to this process a lot.
Would it be better
I think it's about a balance.
Categorize this by EPA?
You want to have
is that something you could do?
That's an interesting idea. It's so different though. Like, you can be high EPA just because you're in the red zone, or high expected points just because you're in the red zone. You can be, high leverage expected points just because you're on third down. But they're such different types of the field, and you're going to get such different things to the defense. I think organizing it by down and distance is how I would do it. But I think I would just allocate my percent of plays to reflect a little bit more of the leverage. I think it's okay to practice, first and second down more, but I want to make sure I've got a more, probably a healthier dose of options on third down than we saw last year.
Yeah, I think the thing that remains to be seen, what's in this kind of portal era where we're constantly cycling through quarterbacks. Is this something that with a second-year DJ Lagway they do more? Was it a function of, hey, we've got a first-year quarterback every year? Now, Mertz, it was still similar, but maybe we saw his you'll see here in a second when we talk to Matt Edwards, we saw the Mertz heat chart. Maybe it was limited to somewhat what he could do, what he was comfortable with. So maybe with a guy like Lagway, that expands a little bit more. It could be a function of that as well, right? So it could be a function of kind of having those first-year quarterbacks, and then Mertz, who was more comfortable with those quicker intermediate throws than Lagway, who can kind of spin it all over the field. So,
all right,
if it's the same spacing slant this year, then we got a problem, right?
I have a good example of why, like, how leveraged third down is. And this comes from just like the highest EPA per play game by a quarterback in the NFL is RG3. And in that game, he went 23 for 32 for 291 yards and interception. Not that impressive a stat line.
No.
He was 8 for 8 on third downs. He was able to convert these high leverage situations, and they were such high leverage situations that he converted that he accumulated so many expected points just personally passing that he overcame a really mediocre stat line.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
But that is essentially keeping your team on the field for 8 drives that they shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
which is exceptionally valuable. So
yeah, I would love to see a study on how it would be split if you put a little bit more weight into that in terms of how would you split practice reps. If it's like goal line, there's not a lot of situations, but if you told me, hey, we're going to be really good at the goal line, so we're going to spend a little bit more time on it, we're going to score a touchdown every time we're down there, that's probably valuable.
Yeah.
It is an interesting balance you got to find because there are so many situations in football that you have to practice. But I wonder if that is leading to kind of some of the performance issues.
I think it's definitely something we're going to keep an eye on. You could do it by like likelihood of success, right? You probably don't want to practice a play that, you're changing your chances of success from 1% for 2%. So practicing third and long, I wouldn't emphasize that. But, practicing third and 3, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Practicing third and 5, especially how much we like to go for it on fourth. Yeah, for sure.
So like third right now, just based on percentages, third and longs are just third and 11 plus happen about as often as third and 4 to 6. But like you said,
way higher chance
of converting of third and 4 to 6 are much higher. So maybe you skew it to where it's okay. With our third and long play.
Yeah, those are things that actually keep your drive alive longer.
Yeah. So, all right, well, we've got a great interview here coming up with Matt Edwards. So hang out.
First one,
that first interview. Great first guest here. He works with StatBomb and HUDL IQ. Does some kind of really cool tracking data and kind of merges the film with the analytics. Really cool.
Former coach and has ran data.
Ran analytics at Virginia when they made the Orange Bowl against Florida. I think he was there with that staff. So when they were pretty good, he was there doing kind of the analytics side of everything. So
and now is running StatBomb like HUDL IQ here in the U.S. At a really high level, and it's just a really great guy. So fun to get to talk with him.
Yep. So stay tuned right now. Listen to us talk with Matt. Thank you guys for listening this far to kind of a super long episode of Gators Game Day, but it's been a long off season, so we had to go a little long here. But thank you guys for listening. I think you'll enjoy this interview with Matt Edwards. All right. So Bud and I started Gators Game Day because we wanted to mix some film watching with some advanced stats and analytics. And so we couldn't have picked a better first guest than Matt Edwards. Matt is a guy that can live in both worlds, the film world. He was a coach, analytics world. He's working with StatBomb and HUDL IQ right now. Matt, can you give us a little bit about your background for listeners that may not know you?
Yeah, I'd love to. First off, excited to be a guest here on Gators Game Day.
First one.
First
Number
guest.
one.
It's a big deal.
That's right.
Whoever has to follow me, I feel bad for them. A little bit about my background. So I played at BYU. I played tight end and then knew that I wanted to be around football and my initial thought was coaching. My grandpa coached at BYU, so thought he had a pretty sweet gig there, and then so started as a graduate assistant there, then coached at a Division III school, and then from there became an analyst, and then eventually the director of football analytics at the University of Virginia. So while there, I got a master's in data science, and it kind of really leaned heavily into the analytics side of things, and realized that, yeah, I mean, I love the game of football, so I knew that I wanted to be around football, but I love the data, and kind of like you said, combining data with, you know, football knowledge and how you can use information better, and just kind of really diving in there. So loved my time as the director of football analytics at UVA, and then our head coach resigned and started to look at different opportunities, and had the opportunity to join a newer company on the data side, StatBomb. You know, they've been a kind of worldwide or global football or soccer leader in data, and we're just starting out a football or American football product, and thought it'd be really cool to kind of see where it went. And a couple of years later, we were acquired by HUDL, and now work for HUDL on the kind of the one of the biggest, if not biggest, football tech. I don't know if I'd say data especially, but tech kind of football companies in the world. So it's been a kind of interesting ride so far.
What's been like the most surprising kind of, or maybe something that was eye-opening, a part of your journey from starting as a GA to where you are now?
I think the biggest thing is just how big football staffs have become. You know, when I played, we had like one director of football operations who did everything from handling recruiting to handling travel to handling, you know, everything almost. And now these staffs are gigantic, with 10 analysts and assistant coaches and assistant coaches and you know, 50 people recruiting staffs. Like it's crazy how much it's exploded. And so with that comes just tons more man hours or person hours of work that can be done, but also like the reliance on getting information from wherever you can. So in the past, it was like you'd go recruiting and you'd find, you know, you'd have to have really good relationships with the high school coaches to find players. And now it's, you can sit in an office and watch HUDL clips all day and find really good players. And then, you know, your obviously relationships still matters. But I think that's the biggest thing is, you know, where football was. You know, I played, you know, it's just over 15 years ago now. And I mean, the just size of the staffs and support that is there for these football teams is wild.
Yeah, that's something we talk about, like Florida, like sometimes tongue in cheek, but Florida has an army of so many guys. It gets pretty large.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I mean, the money's there. So, and I mean, everybody loves working in sports to some degree. So it's an awesome opportunity for a lot of people.
You mentioned like the recruiting side of things. I think that's when you and I first started talking, is like recruiting data. You know, between like recruiting, game planning, like now with the tracking data, opponent scouting, like there's a lot of different types of data in college football. What do you think has been like one of the things that you've seen really click with a staff the most?
The things that I think that click the most are when you're able to take data and have it resemble something that's actually football related. So for instance, at HUDL, with our HUDL IQ product, we create tracking data as part of that. And there are a couple of different places that you can get speeds and accelerations and things like that. And I think coaches are getting a better handle of, okay, over 20 miles per hour is kind of a, you know, hey, if they're hitting 20, 21, that's pretty good for skill guys. But the way that you can make it make even more sense is by saying, all right, well, this player's speed is 21 miles per hour, whatever it is. But when they're running a deep route, this is how fast they're running a route. Trying to contextualize things as much as possible. You know, when we talk about like offensive line athleticism, that's great. You can say, hey, our right tackle is really athletic or not athletic enough. Let's talk about like how much movement they're actually getting when they're getting into a pass set, or D linemen, you know, how quickly they're getting off the ball. When you can make it as contextual as possible, I think that's really when coaches start to, they think eat, sleep, and breathe football, and anything that touches that makes sense to them. So if you can talk football with data, a lot of coaches are really accepting of it and crave that kind of information. It doesn't feel as much like football or analytics versus football. It's like things can work together if you make it contextual and kind of speak the language.
Are the programs you're working with and talking with, are they using this in kind of all aspects? Like not just kind of looking at how guys perform, but also maybe optimizing their NIL strategy or tracking, for injury prevention or those kind of things. Are they using this in all facets?
Yeah, I think that the really advanced teams are using all data that they can get, and trying to use it in all different aspects of the program. One of the things that makes HUDL and what we do really interesting is that our data is able to touch so many areas of a football program. I think everybody knows HUDL and the high school recruiting space. So you're able to get high school data and, from HUDL. You're also able to get college kind of play-by-play or event data. You're also able to get tracking data. And what that means is you get your physical metrics and how fast your players are running, and some of the stuff in sports science. We can touch that area of the program as well. So we're talking, game planning, self-scout, recruiting high school, recruiting the transfer portal, sports science. And then if you're using it, you can say, all right, well, these are our players. These are the things that we want from our quarterbacks. We want them to do A, B, and C. And if, our quarterbacks from the data are doing those things, this is about what they'd be worth. And so, yeah, it's one of the things that I have really enjoyed about being, I worked for StatBomb, recently acquired by HUDL. It's just so many different areas that we can help these programs. It's been really interesting to see.
How prevalent is the usage with the high school film? Because it seems like we were talking before, HUDL is so prevalent at the high school level. You could get, it would seem like potentially 8 years of data on somebody by the time they get out of college. Is it that prevalent or that easy to use?
So the thing with, the HUDL in the past has been great for getting just film in general, right? And so getting that has been kind of the initial maybe screening of these athletes. Some of the things that we have done recently is we have added some more data collection at the high school level so that teams are getting, actual stats. And we also did kind of a beta testing of our tracking data at the high school level. And so we tracked, I think it was the top 100 recruits, collected every one of their games, all of their routes. For these top 100, I think it was receiver recruits across the country, so that we're going to be able to, at some point, get, again, eventing data as well as tracking data at the high school level. So that teams, especially the NFL, they're able to say, all right, this player, we can track their athletic progression from, let's say they're a sophomore the first time in high school they step on the field. They get sophomore, junior, senior year there, 3 or 4 years at the college level. And they, like you said, 8 years, you can get a really good feel for how an athlete has progressed, what kind of, growth they have made, have they stagnated, where, are they at athletically, not to mention all of the production data as well. So I think it's going to be really interesting as we at HUDL kind of lean into bringing some of the advanced data that we had at StatBomb to the lower levels as well.
Yeah. You mentioned the top 100 receivers. Like, are there positions that you're finding are better in football for tracking data? Like, how granular can it get? Like, for the offensive line, can it get like the direction of a slide protection? Like, what are kind of the limits of this?
The thing so for our machine learning, it's really easy to identify people in space. So receivers, DBs, it's really easy to recognize who they are and track them throughout the whole play. You mentioned offensive line, and that's really hard. We have a really interesting collection process that allows for manual intervention to say, this track actually is that person. O lineman and D lineman come together, then a D lineman separates and say, okay, that is still that defensive lineman. And so we feel like we have the most accurate tracking data on the market, which then allows users to say, all right, anything that you can want. We've talked about, in our tracking data, especially for like offensive linemen, right? There's somebody that doesn't traditionally have any metrics, at least any good metrics, right? You can talk about like, oh, they gave up a pressure, they gave up a sack. Those are not good. But what kind of data can we have that is actually positive about offensive linemen? And so with our data and the way that we collect it, we're able to talk about, individual run block scheme by offensive linemen, pass protection scheme. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but how well they move in both of these instances. When you have a really good collection process, you're able to get good data with those guys up front that, quite frankly, does not exist anywhere else. And so it's been, it's not easy to get those guys up front like it is the receivers and those guys that are in a lot of space, but we've built a pretty good pipeline to make sure that we get data on everybody on the field.
Yeah, and you were a GA, so I'm sure you had to go through some of the GA stuff of inputting a lot of data. How far out do you think you are from eliminating a lot of that work, that input, that manual input, and guys having to watch plays over and over and identify things?
There is a lot of stuff that our teams are utilizing our data for so that they can free up their GAs to do other work. The thing about being a data provider that is providing data to 100 FBS teams or whatever it's going to be this fall is that you can only do so much that a team like specifically requests, especially if you have that many teams. So I think there will always be something that a coach is like, you know what, I'm going to have to get this data on my own without going through an external party to get the data. So there will always be some of that maybe some coach has some really specific thing that they look for with tendencies and it doesn't necessarily fall under what we do. But yeah, a lot of it's just recreating kind of what a GA would be tagging or an analyst or what any type of data that might be interesting to a coach. So we're constantly adding stuff, but there's always stuff that a specific coach is going to have in mind that we don't necessarily have.
So at HUDL, y'all don't touch just football. Like, I know that, like, you're in other sports as well. Is there anything from like hockey or basketball, like in that analytics space that like you've noticed that you're like, man, that could be cool, like on the football side?
Yeah. I think the thing that's been interesting for me in my space is that tracking data is still fairly new across all sports. It's within the last 10 or so years. And so every league, every sport is constantly trying to evolve and see how they're able to use this data better. And so that's something that I do is I kind of look at what teams are doing at the NBA level. I personally just don't know hockey that well, so it's a little bit more I can't quite find those things that make sense to me with that sport. But yeah, I would say regularly I see something that somebody's put together in soccer and thought, wow, that's a really interesting idea at that level, but it could be something that's interesting in football as well. I think in soccer, they talk a lot about like space creation or space ownership when you're talking about attacking players and defenders. And there's a lot of that happens with, O and D linemen. So how is that something that we could bring into, talking about how well O linemen protect and what a pocket looks like and that kind of stuff. So, I think as with any job and any space, if you're constantly looking to improve, you're probably going to be looking at places that may not be exactly in that field. And you can always get ideas almost anywhere.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to kind of the personal side real quick. For those that don't know, your grandfather was Lavelle Edwards, longtime head coach at BYU, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously got to experience kind of his personal legacy being his grandson, but when did you first understand kind of the schematic legacy that he left on the game? Because he was a huge, huge impact that's really still being felt kind of today.
Yeah. I think I always kind of heard that obviously I knew BYU was really successful, especially in the 1980s. They won the national championship in 1984, had a Heisman Trophy winner in 1990, and like kind of grew up historically thinking, yeah, BYU was pretty good when my grandpa coached. I think when he retired, they were like, he was 6th all time in wins or something like that. But I think it was really when I got to college when I realized the schematic impact. Obviously I went to BYU and so played at the same school that he had coached at, and offensive coordinator when I played had been the O-line coach under Mike Leach, who was, got the air raid from BYU, his time there. And so when I played, it was air raid, historic BYU stuff kind of mixed in with the Texas Tech stuff. And when I played, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. But then when I became a graduate assistant, when I really started to dive into kind of schematic trends in football and understanding that side of things a little bit better, I think that's where it kind of hit me, where I was like, this is really big, not just across college football, which is, amazing, but even into the NFL, with like what happened with the West Coast offense. I remember a time I was at my grandparents' house, and I wish that I took this. I was just looking through books downstairs in my grandpa's house, and out drops this note, and it's from Bill Walsh. And it's like, thanks for spending the last 3 days with me, teaching me all of the things about BYU offense. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is, obviously my grandpa's, I think he's pretty cool, but like Bill Walsh, to have him, write something about that and how much he learned, like that was a pretty awesome note to find. And every time I've gone back to my grandparents' house recently, I keep looking for it to see if I can find it again. But to see the impact across all levels is pretty cool.
Yeah, you can still see the fingerprints all over NFL and college. But just being in your position now, what's kind of the next innovation in passing? Like, what have you seen? What are the trends in terms of passing schemes? What's showing up in the data? And like, what do you think is kind of the next big thing there?
Yeah, the thing that I think, and this is something that we had found when I was working at the University of Virginia, teams that can throw the ball over the middle of the field tend to have a lot of success. There's kind of like a sweet spot at about 15 to 20 yards air depth of, air yards that are downfield. You still have pretty good control over the throws that go that distance. It's not quite the boomer bust 40-yard passes downfield, but that kind of 15 to 20 yards over the middle, so posts, digs, overs by your slot receivers or tight ends, those are some of your most efficient routes that can get you big plays without having to dial up, hey, let's just throw it deep and hope something good happens. And so I think you see a lot of, crossing routes. Obviously, you see mesh and what a big deal that is. And so I think throwing it over the middle of the field, throwing it in that kind of like sweet spot, to me, I've always pictured it. We talked a little bit about what you can take from other sports. So when we talk about the NBA, how it's kind of turned into like 3-pointers and dunks or layups, it's, kind of your screens are your layups and your dunks that are good to get, let's say we want to get a couple of efficient yards when you're specifically talking pass game. But then how are you going to get those 3-pointers of those explosive plays that are still efficient? And that, I think that comes when you're talking about posts or your in cutters that are over the middle of the field in that kind of like 15 to 25 yard downfield target range. That's where you see really efficient plays that are still getting, thrown downfield while not just, chucking it up and hoping your receiver is going to go make a play.
Okay.
Yeah, we've looked at a lot at like Florida's offensive identity, and like the crossers definitely jump out as part of that. Like with the data you have, is there anything schematically for Florida that like catches your eye, or especially under Billy Napier lately on offense in the passing game?
Yeah, I'm going to actually try and present. I'm going to share my screen. Something that I was looking at today actually was, this is just from our passing chart from last season. And, this is, let's say, all of Florida's passes from last year, and it's kind of just like a conglomerate, and it may be interesting or not. But some of the things I thought were interesting when you look at Graham Mertz, it's all kind of those layups, dunks, a bunch of passes close to the line of scrimmage. And then when DJ Lagway took over, it's a lot more kind of spread out. It's also easy to see kind of in these heat maps. So this is the heat map for DJ Lagway and how different that is from Graham Mertz. And you can see just throwing the ball downfield a lot more. Obviously, they're two very different players, but trying to take advantage of DJ Lagway's arm and his skill set for sure.
We spent a lot of time last offseason trying to figure out if Florida wasn't throwing it deep because of Graham Mertz or something else, and this could have cleared it up very quickly for us.
And something else that kind of stuck out to me is, so this is one of our tools, our line pressure tool, and quickly you can see how drastic the difference is in giving up pressures on the right side versus the left side of the line of scrimmage. And so when you talk about different, as a coach, you'd see this and be like, all right, well, we got to really address what's happening on the right side, whether it's getting our players better, bringing in new players, changing up scheme, some of those things. But there, as I was looking at some of these plays, there seemed to be some miscommunication, probably is a good way of saying it, with the offensive linemen in either picking up the right guys or leaving players for the running back, which had some pretty bad mismatches. And I will say there was a play that really caught my eye that made me pretty excited for DJ Lagway in one of these, where he was in the pocket getting pressured, basically shrugged a defender who still had his hand around his foot. Another guy was bringing him pressure, and he just kind of like sidearm flinged it 25 yards, like right on the money to a guy running towards the sideline. I thought, okay, that's a pretty impressive play, and then he may be okay.
Yeah, from a true freshman too, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then I think that may have been, maybe it happened a few times, but it may have been against Ole Miss, who had some dudes up front too. So I think he'll be all right. So
yeah.
You coach tight ends, you play tight ends. What in modern football, what makes a tight end kind of valuable? We're seeing them. It seems like you're seeing more like 12 personnel, more 2 tight end sets. What is kind of making them come back in vogue a little bit here after we saw so much 10 and 11 kind of early in the 2000s?
Yeah, I was surprised at how much Florida ran 12 personnel last year. Kind of way more than the average in college football. And the thing that I obviously, like you said, I played tight end, coach tight end, as well as kind of a couple other positions. And I think that tight ends are able to create mismatches, and it's really hard for defenses to know what to do with them. And quite frankly, I think this goes for anybody that doesn't fit like a true position, right? If you have a receiver who does a lot of stuff in the backfield running the ball, like Percy Harvin in the past at Florida, right? Like, obviously he was a really good receiver, but when he was in the backfield, he was also doing really good things. And so, do you treat him like a receiver? Do you treat him like a running back? If you have tight ends like that who can do multiple things, it makes it really hard for defenses to key in with their kind of normal calls of saying like, all right, 11 personnel. I think it's almost like 60 or 65% of college offenses are all running 11 personnel. Defenses are really dialed into what that looks like, how to defend it, who goes where, all of their checks, all the formations. But if you can get into 12 personnel, that changes a couple of things. You get some mismatches. You run a tight end out at receiver. Do you line them both up at true tight end positions? One of them might line up in the backfield, kind of like a fullback. And so the thing that makes tight ends tricky is that you can do so many different things while being in just one kind of personnel grouping. And so I think that's the most common way that teams use kind of unique players and unique skill sets. But the more that you have players that are able to do multiple things, I think that is something that we'll see out of more players. You see people like Deebo Samuel lining up in the backfield, and with the 49ers, they line up Christian McCaffrey all over the field. And, they are in 11 personnel, which teams maybe 21 personnel when they get into, with Juszczyk and George Kittle, but they can get into 10 personnel sets and 22 personnel sets with those guys. And so that's when you become really difficult, is when you're able to do multiple things.
And last question, we'll let you get out of here, but this is purely from kind of the fan perspective here. What's something you've learned from kind of your like more in-depth study that surprised you or maybe changed how you see the game?
I think the things that changed how I see a game is the intricate chess game that happens between the coaches. Every decision that happens it happens for a specific reason. It's calculated, and either the offense is trying to take advantage of what a defense has done in the past, or the defense is trying to predict what an offense is going to do in the future. And so something that I've noticed in my time working with other coaches on coaching staffs or seeing what people are doing is, I think people think almost a defense, they get a bad rap as being kind of like these dumb meatheads that just run around and like see ball, get ball. But defense it's really scientific, right? Everything that a defense does is based on tendencies, right? When they're in 11 personnel in the red zone on 3rd and 5, this is the type of plays that they run. And so it's really scientific about what an offense is going to do. And offense is really the one that's more kind of artistic, like, hey, what are our guys really good at? What can we do with the skill that we like, with the talent level that we have to try and move the ball? And so I think those things kind of combine into a point that, like, these coaches that spend 80 hours a week watching film, just watching film, not to mention going out to practice and all that other stuff, like they're watching for very specific things, and they're really good at finding ways to get advantages for their own team.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. Awesome job. Just as we expect, and that's why we made you the first guest here on Gators Game Day. But where can people find you if they want to follow your work? Because I know you do put some blogs and things like that out. I saw some leading up to the draft stuff. So where can people find you?
Yeah, at the Coach Edwards. Feels a little bit weird to have the Coach Edwards when it should be my grandpa. But so at the Coach Edwards, both on Twitter and Blue Sky. Post the occasional huddle IQ stuff there. The occasional blog about what we're doing, and just tons of just football content.
Awesome. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. It was great.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much.